Hi, friends. Welcome to Adobe Live Spotlight. This is such an exciting time because we have with us Desire Lacap, and she's so cool already. I'm looking at a lot of her work all around our industry, and I want to learn more about her today. And so, as we jump into the chat. If you have questions of your own, we can ask them along. We are live, folks. And if you haven't already, please join us on Adobe Live on YouTube and subscribe to keep up with all of our live streams. So, Desiree, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I am doing great here from the side of Texas. Doesn't seem to stop being gray. I don't know what happened, but I am happy to be here and learning more about filmmakers, especially women filmmakers. We were just chatting about that here on the industry. So we'd love to learn more about what inspired you to get into this space.
Mhm.
Really kind of roll back to the beginning and tell me about that story. Like, why filmmaking?
Oh, there's so much to it. I was always a kid
Yeah.
with the camera in middle school, like a little purple point and shoot, just capturing everybody, and then going home and editing it on like this
Mhm.
website I found randomly. I didn't know anything about Premiere at the time, but that's how I fell in love with it, with the whole post-production process, because I feel like that's just such a magical part of the whole filmmaking process.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so I was always a kid with a camera. So I just, sorry, one moment, take a breather. But
I feel like I
I,
was also the same thing, actually. I
mm,
really relate to what you said the point and shoot. You were that kid.
yeah, I
There's always one
was.
kid.
No,
That's
for
all.
sure. And honestly, though, I grew up in a very I grew up in a very traditional Filipino household. So they expected me to go into the medical field, which I did try it out for a second. But
Mhm.
I was like, it doesn't feel right. So I finally pursued film and I went to a film program and I was like, okay, this is what's lighting up my soul. This is what feels good. And luckily,
Right.
my first career job was with the Golden State Warriors as a production assistant. I was able to soak in a ton of information from lead videographers, editors, graphic designers, visual effect people. So that really was confirmation for me, like, oh, okay, I could do this. Like, despite in the beginning the struggles of, a male dominated industry, my class when I was in film school was all male, and they didn't really understand my perspective as a female filmmaker. So
Mhm.
that was one of the challenges I kind of had to maneuver through.
Right.
But yeah, other than filmmaking, although I fell in love with post-production, I have developed an eye for cinematography. So I've kind of also been going that route as well.
Mm.
Currently just wrapped up a feature documentary film, working on music videos, short films, and also still posting some film tips and tricks all across social media. Just wanting to share what I know with everybody and especially
I
the journey.
absolutely love that. I definitely encourage you to follow that train of thought of like, learning more about photography because that relationship of photography and videography is one that I'm navigating myself. And it's
Mhm.
so, so, so interesting because they're very different, but so alike at the same time.
Yeah.
That's so exciting that I think sounds to me like you are going against a lot of the expectations from either your family or the world at large, right? I
Mhm.
definitely think it's invaluable that we have different perspectives in filmmaking. And when I hear that there is somebody from a different ethnicity, from a different gender, something that is not reflected enough in film, I can't say like, that's amazing. That
Yeah.
honestly is absolutely incredible. So, can we learn a little bit more about how your workflow incorporates some of the Adobe tools if you feel like that has helped boost and moved you forward?
Yeah, I mean, I use a lot of the whole Creative Cloud actually, especially Premiere Pro with After
Yeah.
Effects as well. A long time ago, if I look back at my work, I'm like, I really want to learn visual effects. So I'm like filming anything and everything and then YouTubing how to do something, putting it into After Effects. And I used to do the most with effects. So because of that, I did gain like the skill sets to have visual effect background. A lot of people don't know that,
Right.
but I do love doing that as well. But Premiere Pro is my bread and butter. Like I am in that every single day, working on all my projects, learning the new technical updates, and just kind of staying updated with that, as well as still challenging myself as an editor and seeing how I could get better with storytelling and then using the tools here as well. But I could dive deep into this project file I have to show.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of my favorite things to learn from other creators or other artists in these spaces, and I'm going to ask this of you, is what are some of your like fundamental best three tools within the program that you use for your editing? Because I feel like it often changes for me, but everybody has at least like some religious three top ones, and I'd
Yeah.
love to hear what yours are.
Okay. It's
Mhm.
pretty standard. It's the hotkeys, the Q and W.
Okay,
I'm always using
for
that.
cutting.
Yeah, especially if I have
Mhm.
a long video, I'll just drag it into a new sequence and I'll just kind of go QW instead of having to click cut, delete,
Okay.
all that stuff. But my most used one is the remix tool. Um,
Really?
yes,
Oh my God,
because
that's really interesting to hear that.
really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear because I was like,
Yeah.
is that standard? Is that
It's
like,
fairly new. It's a fairly new tool. And I think some people are still navigating how can I use it best? Like, what are the best soundtrack candidates for this tool? 'Cause
yeah,
sometimes it comes out funky. So I'm intrigued. Yeah.
it is, but it works because you know how we used to do it. We used to cut in the middle, try to find the 4 count, and then
Little
fade it in.
soft
You're like,
moment. Yeah.
yeah, you're just like, oh wait, this doesn't sound right. But this is
That's
I
already
always
like five steps, basically.
yeah, exactly. And we're
Mhm.
just eliminating click rates. So this is the best bet for my workflow, honestly,
Oh, I
because
love that.
starting off with, I mean, organization is key for me in any project
Okay.
I do. Yeah, so if you could see my bin here, it's always named like 01 footage, 02 sequences, sound
Mm.
effects or music, voiceovers, etc. Just because you could get lost in the sauce trying to do too much, especially with a pretty big project file. But going
Yes.
back to the
Okay.
remix tool, I always start with laying out my music and everything first. That way I know how I'm cutting my story.
So do
Uh,
you cut to your music?
I do actually for the most part. So
Mhm.
usually I'm downloading stems as well. And
Okay.
sometimes I like to have the vocals in the background, but sometimes I don't because maybe I'm talking. So yeah, with the
Okay.
remix tool though, it's my favorite. Or just like
I
marking
love
where the
that.
beat is at. Yeah, because it's just like you're either
Yeah.
dragging it or you're going here. But another one, which is relatable to audio, is the Essential Sound Panel. I'm in
Mhm.
there a lot because I'm not a sound engineer. I don't know how to throw in effects. So
Right, right, right. And it seems like so many hats to contend with when you're like, okay, I'm doing video editing, but hold on, I need to deal with sound. I need to deal with image, visuals. Do you find that to be like these spaces that you try to get better at? I think you're often teaching others. Do you often find yourself teaching yourself things as well?
yeah, yeah, I think that's the best part. Like when I'm teaching other people, sometimes I
Yeah.
have to go back to my own tutorials and be like, wait, how do I do this one thing?
I did.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's totally a moment. I don't know if anybody else experiences that, but it's a
yeah.
phenomenon.
It is. It is so funny. But yeah, just a mixture of like video with music and color grading,
Right.
sound design. It's just this symphony of
Mhm.
assets that create emotion. So I think that's,
Beautifully said.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of those spaces where everybody has their own workflow, but there are definitely some fundamental things that can just get you started.
Yeah.
Um, what would you find is like very fundamental to you? I know you just said like being organized is very important.
Mm.
Uh, is there something else around that area too?
I would say the way I approach a project. And
Okay.
besides organization, it's kind of like, okay, how do I take a step back and not overwhelm myself with a video? So usually, this isn't a really good example, but I'm usually starting with my A-roll footage, putting that in a timeline, cutting my talking head footage down, and then I'll
Mhm.
always duplicate my sequence, always, because I think it's so important to back up your timelines in case you need to go back. Because you could only Command Z so much, and you don't
Hmm.
want to lose what you've done like an hour ago. So I think it's just the approach in creating this template for myself to edit without being overwhelmed.
Yeah, and it's I think that also invites different iterations, maybe. I don't know if you approach it in that way, uh, to find a new version of the story of the
Yeah.
timeline. Do you ever come find yourself revisiting a project and be like, wow, I could have said that a little bit differently,
Oh,
or actually I could have added a little bit of sound effects here. Do you ever find yourself revisiting a project because you've learned more? Um, you know what I mean?
yeah, always, all the time. I'm just like, oh man, I could have done this different. But it's as we go,
Yeah,
like each
right.
project, we're developing new skills and knowledge for it. So it's like, okay, cool. Like I'm gonna apply what I didn't do here to my next project. Like,
Absolutely. Like
mhm.
then you can get excited about the next project as opposed to being a perfectionist over the one project, right? We all kind of
Oh my
experience
gosh,
that. We're like
perfectionism.
I always joke about this. Like a project can be so many things that you really don't know the end of the project. But it's
Yeah.
really that's the power of the artist. Like you choose that ending, right?
Oh,
So
I love that actually. I think
yeah.
just the other day something came to mind. It's like having to detach myself from the outcome because it's
Mhm.
like when you have an idea written down, you're like, okay, cool, I'm gonna edit it, but it doesn't go my way sometimes. And that's where I need to be accepting of what how it should turn out instead of being like, ah no, it needs to be this way. And just being
Yeah.
open to the outcome of it turning out beautiful regardless.
I definitely think that may be a result or a consequence of us being these visual folk, these people who think visually all the time. So we can
Mhm.
foresee this future. And so we can almost see it so well that it's incredible to kind of go for it. And then it's like, wait, hold on. It was not exactly as I expected.
Yeah.
And then and how do you how what mental like skill sets do you find yourself using, I would say, also as a creator to stay, I would say, persistent in this industry, in filmmaking?
I think just keeping an open mind, and it took me a long time to get where I'm at mentally and just being
Mm.
my biggest fan. I think that's what I preach a lot in my videos because it is easier
Yeah,
to like put ourselves down and carry this weight that we don't really deserve to carry, right? Like we are
right,
good enough with however, whatever level we're at. So just keeping that in mind of like, okay, cool. And what I just mentioned about detaching myself from projects emotionally, like it could hit me
right.
emotionally like I just recently did a project as I was editing it. It really hit home and I was tearing and I was like, those are the emotions
Oh, I
I
love
feel.
that.
Yeah, like I don't
It's
want to feel
amazing.
like I could have done better or I could have done this because they're gonna come. But I think just reprogramming your mind to be like, no, it's gonna be good enough regardless. So just kind of going through those
Right.
steps.
I
Yeah.
absolutely love that. And just revisiting that thought process, as much as possible. So, what do we have here in, the timeline? Is this a
Okay.
project you're currently working on? Was it already published? The
It
timeline
was
looks
actually already
nice, beautifully
published.
coded.
Yeah, organization. I feel like this is how I mentally remember my
Mm,
timeline.
right.
So this timeline, it was a video about sound design and the importance of it. I don't know if you want to play it, but I just wanted to explain the layers of sound because it's just as important as a visual aspect, right? Like the sound is what draws in the audience subconsciously. They don't really know it does, but it does.
It's
So
very quiet, ironically, but very
yeah.
loud.
Oh my God, that's a good way to put it. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So just to explain each layer of sound, well, first it's really good to stay organized with your timeline, whether it's labeling it or separating the audio tracks. But I like to label it as well because sometimes I'm overlapping them. So this line right here is all of the in-camera audio that I recorded. So when I'm filming stuff and I'm like, I want to use it in case I can't find it or I don't have to Foley it, I'm actually just using it. So I'll solo this right here so we could hear. It's just the door, the keys. So those are just the tracks that I used from in camera and then intentionally recording it. So I know, because I know I'll be using it. And then the
Hmm.
blue layer
So
right.
it's literally like quiet on set. We need to get these like sounds that happen in life. Be-
Exactly. Yeah. I try not to like breathe too loud or talk while I'm
Right.
recording, but yeah. The blue one is just my dialogue as I'm
Hmm.
speaking here. So sound design. It's just as important as the visual element. So that's that audio track right here. And then the
Perfect.
yellow ones is my music track. And if you're wondering why there's two, it's because I added keyframes to a track or all of them because I added
The
this
different
effect.
stems.
Yeah, and I just added the bass underwater subroof out of the car effect.
Cool.
And then
And you
the
can visibly see it too. You can see that these tracks have effects on them. You can see the
yeah.
color coding, you can see the effects on the waveforms.
Mhm.
Really interesting.
Yeah, so I have a lot of fun doing that stuff because it's also experimenting too. Because again, I'm not a sound engineer, so I'm like, oh, what could this do? So the central sound is pretty helpful
Right.
with this.
I love that you highlighted that. I think that is an important element of stepping into the shoes of being like an audio designer because you have to, because you're an editor now.
Mhm.
Or, if you're striving in that space, you have to wear that hat. But experimenting and trying it out and seeing the right effects for your audio conditions.
Mhm.
Is there an audio effect that you find that is like absolutely necessary in most of your steps when you're testing like the audio of, let's say, your voiceover? Because I notice that you often film in different locations. Am I right?
Yeah.
Right. So with that like in mind, like what kind of editing sound effects do you go to just
Ooh.
test out?
So I actually always, with my dialogue, because I'm always filming, or my audio levels is always a little bit lower because I don't want to peak. I'd rather raise it than not be able to save it. So I'm always using, let's see, where's my dialogue? I'll always tag it as a dialogue and I'll just usually use loudness because Premiere is just going to auto match the levels for me, which is super convenient instead of me having to go into each one like, oh, let me raise it and guess it and then play it.
Absolutely, right. That's a
Yeah.
good rule of thumb to just make sure to record low enough. So
Mhm.
that's the baseline. We have someone here in the chat saying always capture room tone. So that's Joshua here on the chat, and Jacob agrees. Room tone is very crucial. Do you find that you make time to capture room tone? Do you kind of get away with not filming it? I know
Mhm.
kind of goes both ways in most cases.
I think most times I tend to forget, but it is important because I do agree with that in case I need to dub over a voice and like still have that, say I'm
Mm,
filming outside and it matches
doesn't feel so
the video. Yeah.
different.
So I agree. It's really important. Room tone.
Okay, practice and watching photo related live streams. Yeah, absolutely. I think the chat is definitely a little bit more aware of like audio and things like this. So I absolutely love that we're touching on these points of how you've been able to develop your career using these tools. Did
Mhm.
you feel like it was an easy decision for you? Was this like a space that made you feel like, okay, I understand it right off the bat? I feel like when I looked at it, I was like, wow, this is so complex. Oh my gosh, where to begin? Why Premiere? I would ask
Mhm.
because I'm asking myself that question every day just
Yeah.
to understand, am I working with the best tools?
Yeah,
Um,
honestly, for someone who doesn't do sound, right? Like I'm mainly focused on picture. Premiere allows me to feel like I am a professional sound design person. Like just being able to layer the audio tracks and then going into the central sound panel. And let's see, I think I have one here. And then just clicking a preset. Like if I want it to sound like outside, then it's gonna sound like outside or in a large room, make distant. And then even going from heavy reverb, which I use these a lot, especially like make it sound like it's from the left. I recently worked on a project where sound design was so heavy because it was about like what was in my head. So I wanted it to
mm.
feel overwhelming and super powerful. So this was definitely a heavy tool that I used for that.
Oh, I love that when
Mhm.
videos go into it. category that it can be so abstract that it yields you to create these like weird effects on purpose.
Mhm.
But I understand what you mean. I think the effects, the presets scattered all around Premiere tend to be sort of this like invaluable effect that you don't have to do from scratch, uh,
Mhm.
oftentimes. But then you
Yeah.
have to find what is the effect for, right? You want to be intentional, right? And I love that you were using it for what was on your mind. Is that correct?
Yeah, for sure. Like that project, I'm super excited for it to drop because it that really hit home. It's based on authenticity. And we all wear these masked layers and there's just layers to us. So yeah, it was really important for me to because it's not just me, like our thoughts could get so wild. So it's like, how do I make that really feel overwhelming and powerful in post-production? So it was like a ton of audio tracks and a ton of effects. But yeah, it was fun.
Okay, so how do you feel like with your editing experience, you find yourself like challenging more from your projects as you like tackle each one?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think challenging myself and pushing boundaries involves like a combination of ongoing learning and experimentation and exposure to new techniques, right?
Mm.
Like with continuous learning on the technical side of things, like staying updated with the latest features that Premiere drops. And then on the other side of it, always open to learning how I could improve and elevate my storytelling skills with being intentional of the shots that I choose or the music. Is it right? Does it feel right? Does it feel wrong? And then as I'm doing this, like learning what works for me, what doesn't. Um, but yeah, that just goes into experimentation, like not being afraid of trying new editing techniques or a way of storytelling, right? Taking time to play around with, especially the new features, or again, trying different music under scenes that usually don't fit because you never know, it might work out. So yeah, just not being heavily tied down to what I already know, like what's new in Premiere and how can I use this tool to be efficient in my workflow. So that's kind of how
Hmm.
I approach it to
So
like.
just definitely embracing whatever comes next within
Mhm.
your program and staying afloat. That's a really sound advice. I think that's
Mhm.
a wonderful way to, if you want to explore what's always happening. I
Yeah.
recommend that you download the beta of any of the apps in the Adobe Creative
Yes.
Cloud, and that's always going to be very helpful. And in a way, you're kind of part of the development because you can always provide feedback,
Mhm.
and people listen to this. So we can't, I mean, like I'm always like, wow, okay, so this tool actually happened.
Mhm.
So I'm glad to hear that. I know that you have your work, you share your work in different spaces. Do you face any challenges with social media when it comes to showcasing your work, your editing work there in those vertical spaces, or
Mhm.
kind of staying up to date with it? What are the challenges that you face in those spaces if you have?
Like in terms of editing or just generally?
Yeah, just editing and sharing to social media.
I think with social media, it was a tug between do I film horizontal or do I film vertical? But then I think
That
I've kind
tug.
of, yeah, like I've maneuvered around it, especially with like Premiere as well, because they've made it pretty convenient to edit in horizontal and then reframe for social. I think that was a really, really cool tool
Mm,
and feature that they have is the reframe because I'm exporting for YouTube and
right.
for social media. And it's like you could post horizontal on TikTok or Instagram Reels, but I think you capture the audience more when it is formatted the correct way. So even in Premiere Pro here,
Hmm.
I usually, when I'm editing any vertical, I love using the vertical window just because it's more clear. I don't know. I think I've mentioned this and they're like, wait, wow, you could do that? And I was like, oh, yeah, you
Yes.
could. Like, yeah, and it's way more convenient than having just this small little box on there. But yeah.
And you can just make it into anything really and save
Mhm.
it.
Yeah,
Um,
my favorite.
that's so awesome. I feel like I don't know, recently the being able to publish to TikTok from Premiere I thought
Mhm.
that was really cool. I think there's
Yeah.
some conversation there where people understand that we are using these programs to develop like, short films, these gigantic blockbusters, but also, just marketing material for online,
Yeah.
um, for artists online, right? And so I guess that's what I was trying to touch on, just like
Mhm.
how you navigate that, because I do see that you have your work in different spaces.
Yeah, I haven't personally used exporting straight to TikTok, but I mean, that's something I would definitely try out because if it's eliminates me having to export it and then transfer it to my phone and then upload it, then honestly, that's a game changer in itself.
That's always helpful. We have a question from YouTube. How do you go about planning your videos? And that's a mouthful, I
Mm.
think. But if you can give a few tips there.
Yeah, I mean, I would start with the basics, like going about any video, especially with social media, I'm brain dumping first and foremost. Like I have my notebook and
Mhm.
I'm just jotting down ideas. And then from there, I'll electronically organize it and then possibly write a script to it. I'm a very visual filmmaker. So I'm not a writer at all. Like my writing is just scribble scrabbles and then we'll figure it out. But
I can relate
um,
to that.
yeah, so I just kind of write a script and then
Yeah.
whatever I see the script, like how it's relatable visually, then I'll go ahead and jot that down. I'll film it. I'll be intentional with filming as well, especially with like location and making sure audio is okay. And am I filming at home and it's way more convenient because it's quiet. But that's kind of how I go about it. It's just that step of um, from the idea to the overall execution. But usually, honestly, when I'm filming a lot of my content, I'm kind of just filming it and then figuring it out in post production. I've always been that type of person, honestly. Like I'll storyboard here and there, but post production is where the magic comes to life because you could take something so simple as you filming yourself making coffee, and then turn it into something so dope. Like it's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, something simple, but then like you are thinking outside of the box, like how can I modify this simple storyline into something visually striking?
Mhm.
I can completely see how you take the time to think about that. Um, in the writer thing that you just said, oh my, yeah, totally. I think we all kind of can relate to that. Some of us have
Yeah.
more strength in one side to another, and it does feel like this space demands a lot of different hats, like being good at sound, being good at visuals, and now writing if you're writing transcripts or storylines. Do you ever find it helpful to kind of turn to maybe your community? Do you ever delegate some of your work or find yourself like turning to somebody else
Mhm.
for collaboration? How's that for you?
Oh, yes, always. I love collaborating with other people. Like
Cool.
with social media, it could be a little bit lonely, but with other projects in terms of music videos or films, and even sometimes social content,
Yeah,
collaboration is so important because it's not just my brain being put on the table, it's so many different perspectives. There's something that I didn't think of that someone else thought of. So I really think
right.
it plays a really huge role in creating good videos and films and content.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a good brainstorm really truly happens when you have someone else to bounce ideas off of.
Yeah.
And more so when there's people in the room who have different styles or different ideas altogether from yours, right?
Yeah, for
That kind of
sure.
thing. That's super cool. I often find myself passing along projects, depending if I'm working with a client. Do you find this space to be something that you are able to share these projects with clients? How do you organize yourself for stuff like that if you're passing on these projects along?
Ooh, are you talking about like wrapping up a project file and passing that on?
Yeah, and collaborating or anything like that.
Mhm.
I think that oftentimes this requires a gigantic team, but we forget that because we're
Yeah.
able to rule the moon and the earth with your just you and your computer.
Yeah.
So I totally understand that, but I'm just curious if you have that dynamic, if you have a way to pass those projects along, or if you think
Mhm.
about those steps all that much
Yeah,
at this moment in your career.
for sure. I think when passing on a project file, especially if another editor has to pick it up, it goes back to organization and making sure that when they open up the project file, it's they understand it just as much as like I did when I left it. So in
Mhm.
Premiere, I'm just packaging up the project file. But before that, I'm making sure that again, organization is pretty key here. So yeah, just kind of keeping it clean. That's kind of usually the workflow and passing projects over on my end, at least.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
Mhm.
If somebody says here, if you capture room tone and use normalize and process in post-processing, you can easily reduce the noise if needed. So normalize all of the volumes, I imagine, on the
Oh,
sound. Do you ever use that? 10 seconds from room tone. Everyone hold, please. Wade says that that's the prompt. That's the prompt you ought to say out loud. 10 seconds for room tone. Everyone hold.
I love that. Yeah, I
I
do.
love that.
I do too. Yeah, I do remember like the sound people on set usually are like, everybody stop what you're doing. Like, no
Yeah.
one move. Yeah.
I definitely had a moment where I was like, right, I'm supposed to say action. How
Yeah.
cool is that? But
Yeah.
you're just like, no, it's just on TV.
Yeah. That's funny.
That's awesome.
Love that. Thank you.
So what is this project for? This one hasn't been published yet, you said?
This one actually has been published a
Oh,
few
okay.
months ago. Yeah, I think just showing the sound design aspect of it. Um,
So this is a tutorial based video. It's kind of
it's
hard to
a
tell because it looks lifestyle like has so much care on the B-roll side and talking head. So you let me know. Is it a tutorial?
I would say a educational because it's
Education.
not necessarily I'm sitting down showing you how to do it. I do have a
Mm,
few of those, but this one's more informational, educational
right.
type video because I'm just explaining the importance of it and then the layers of sound that you could add to your videos to take it to the next level.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely navigates that sort of like need for education and entertainment at the
Yeah,
same
for
time. What
sure.
do you say?
Yeah. Because I mean, you don't necessarily have to go out and film these things, right? But how could I grab my audience's attention in the first 3 seconds? Like that's always the
Do you think
struggle.
about that? First 3 seconds, not 5 seconds, three
Not even
seconds.
three, barely three, even like the first two, se- two,
The
1, 2.
first millisecond.
No, really though. A lot of people are just like, I'm gonna keep going.
Well, yes, I guess that there is a bit of a rabbit hole level to that.
Mhm.
Um, I think there's a nice interesting element when you're consistent. Uh, do you think you're developing a style that feels consistent? That starts to kind of feel like, okay, I made that.
Yeah, actually, a little bit in a way. I feel like I'm finding my groove in
You're
that
still kind
sense.
of getting there.
Yeah, because I do have a template when editing overall. Like I'll do my B-roll, my A-roll, my B-roll. Maybe my color grading is what stands out. But other than
Okay.
that, it's like maybe keyframes or like effects because I'll usually like punch it in using keyframes
Mhm.
just to kind of be like, oh, I'm in your face in the first 2 seconds. Like now keep listening to me. Or if it's a
Right.
static shot, because I film a lot by myself, then I'm just adding like those simple
Movement.
animations. Yeah.
Mhm. And so you do you use templates? Is that what I just heard you say?
No, I actually just use the effects control and I'm just creating keyframes within the effects here. Because it could be as simple as like a slow push in or using the Bezier and making it like importance pop in your face like that. So just
Mhm.
simple things that could also be an extra element to add in your videos to make it stand out in a way. Uh,
Yeah.
if
To
it's
create emphasis on the messages that you have in certain moments too.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
you're pointing, there's a moment that you're about to say something important. Just like the
Yeah,
first 3 seconds, as we know it now.
exactly. And even with that, like going back to sound, just maybe adding a little whoosh or like a sound effect that goes with that
Mm.
push in, just an extra element.
And what do you use for sound effects?
I use like where do I get it or what kind do I use?
What do you use any plugins within Premiere? Or do you use like a I don't know, I think Epidemic Sound,
Mhm.
stock Adobe Stock, I think has some things too.
Yeah, so I usually just I use Epidemic primarily, but I've built so much of like a library with so many effects.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, that's the fun part about it. Just kind of
I
implementing.
sometimes accidentally find an effect while like listening to my own audio.
Yeah.
And then I'll just save it as like, okay, that sounds like a thump. That sounds like a swoosh. That sounded like a ring of a bell. Maybe just keep it instead of discarding it. And you
Yeah.
can create like your own library of sorts.
Hmm.
Do you
Yeah.
ever find yourself experimenting like that with
I
audio?
do, especially when I'm looking for a certain sound and I'm like, oh, okay, like, wait, this music track's kind of cool. Where could I use this and how could I use it later?
Right, right. And you
Yeah,
also use Premiere. I mean, sorry, After Effects,
I
right?
do. Yeah, I love After Effects. I'll rotoscope in there all day, mask things out. I also do like replacing like the screens on phones. So yeah, that's pretty fun
What
for
do you
me.
think about the new rotoscope?
It's actually really good compared to
Yeah,
what it was before when I
it's
had to like
actually.
clean it up. I had to clean it up myself, but it does so well with capturing the subject and really, I don't have to do much cleaning. It's just like, okay,
So
cool. Like,
you're, oh, right. So you were used to kind of having to do like, okay, I got to clean this up before I let it run.
yeah.
Mm.
So I think that's I love After Effects, honestly. Yeah, I'm in there often, but not as often as I want to be.
Oh, no, but
Yeah.
you're motivated by like motion graphics in any way? Is that what motivates you towards After Effects, or
Yeah.
what is it about it?
It would be like, I know the interface is very intimidating for a lot of people because once they open it, they're
Very
like,
similar.
no,
Yeah.
yeah. But I think it's even just as simple as doing the keyframes in After Effects. It's really smooth. And just, yeah, the masking and rotoscoping. Those are my favorite top. And then there's a lot more, but
I
it
definitely want to incorporate rotoscoping more because
Mhm.
everybody was so excited about when that launched that I was like, okay,
Yeah,
maybe I could just open it up just for rotoscoping
try it
for no
out. Yeah.
reason at all, just to do it. And maybe the chat can do it as well.
Mhm.
Um, I am curious about your background. Do you find yourself telling more stories from that point of view?
Yeah, like, hmm,
And
I
your journey
feel,
as an artist, as a person.
yeah.
Uh, I know I'm very aware of a lot of your tutorials and things like this, but I know that you're striving in other spaces too. So, um,
Yeah, I
stories like
think
that.
I try to implement like mental health and mental awareness in a lot of my films. I think that's really important
Mhm.
because background, like there was a time where I was also going through it, and I want people to understand through the things that we produce, through the art of filmmaking, that when you look in the mirror, that you believe in yourself just as much as other people do. And
Yeah.
that's just kind of like something that I lead with when producing or coming up with ideas. It's like, how could I, even if it's poetic or subliminally, right? Like I want people to think like, oh, dang, I'm inspired by it. Like I want to do better. I want to see the world in the way they deserve to see it.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's kind of my tackle when
That's
producing.
a beautiful North Star to have. I think that's so interesting because you have to think about it frequently to recognize, oh, am I doing this in my work?
Mhm.
Um, because the vision is absolutely beautiful and we're good visionaries.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. And I think that that story and your technique and editing is going to come into a lot because those are two different people. I don't know if you recognize the one
Mhm.
that crafts the story and then there's the person who's editing who you can clearly find your space in there.
Mhm.
So we'll love to see that development once it happens and have you here again. Can you share with us some of the latest projects that you're currently working on,
Yeah.
that you feel like maybe challenged you in some way that you did not know, and maybe it was unexpected?
Yeah, I mean, the one I recently just spoke about, it was in collaboration with Nikon. They prompted us with one word, which was authenticity. And they gave us 8 days to concept, write, shoot, and edit. And I was like, oh, is my idea way too big? How I see it in my head, how I want to portray this, right? Because there's layers to us. And like there's the trauma, the pain, the anger, and everything. And then beneath all that
Mhm.
is this pure, authentic versions of ourselves.
Mhm.
So that was kind of a challenging one, not only creatively, but also like emotionally. I had to tap into a place where it's just like scary. It used to be so scary for me, but now it's like, no, I want to take this story and I want to inspire other people with it. But
Mhm.
other than that, another project
I
would
think
have to
that's
be
an
the,
amazing project. What
yeah, I'm so excited for you guys to see it.
that sounds phenomenal. What an incredible brief to
Mhm.
receive. A little bit of a limitation because we all need some timelines
For
in our
sure.
industry, especially as creators.
Mhm.
Um, but I can completely relate to the feeling of like you want this idea to be the idea.
Mhm.
But it's
Yeah.
like it's only 8 days and it's only this much. And I think any idea that comes out is like kind of like what you said, like brainstorm dumping, right? Like
Mhm.
brain dumping.
Yeah.
And it might come out more polished than you think, less polished than the final product, but
Mhm.
nevertheless, like it's a thing that you created.
Yeah, and
And
it was beautiful. I don't know what I was filming a lot. I had an initial way of how I wanted it to edit it, but I didn't really know until I got into Premiere and I sat with it. And it took me a while. I was procrastinating a little bit because I was like, no, like I had to detach myself from the outcome. And I'm like, okay, no, it's gonna turn out so good regardless because it's an emotional piece and it means a lot. So regardless, however it turns out is how it's supposed to be.
that's great. And it's also a wonderful medium of expression because it just kind of lets you delve into some storylines that maybe you didn't understand, but then you get to dive into them further and more so like it's like a visual thing. So it doesn't have to be like a definition. It's just like it could be anything.
Yeah.
Right? That's
Yeah.
that's probably why I'm keen on visuals just like you, not so much on the writing part.
Me too. Yeah, I think that's
I'm
the beauty.
trying.
Me too. I am. I'm collaborating with writers. Like, how do you do this? Like,
Yeah, I'm like, whoa, okay. How did you just come up with, especially people who do poetry because it's so
yeah.
small and condensed. It's
Mhm.
like poetry is like the version of doing shorts nowadays. It's just short and condensed and absolutely perfection.
It is.
We have another question here. So I'm also curious about her background. So more so like the background of the environment of the clip. It says, is that sound diffusion wall, like a sound diffusion wall that you're using, or are you in a studio?
Oh, here
Yeah,
behind me. Okay, so honestly, I'm in my garage right now.
that looks like probably not a wonderful place for sound.
It's not,
Do you
but
know what
does
I
it
mean?
sound
Like I
like
just
it?
see cement.
Yeah.
I can almost see the sound bouncing off that cement.
Oh my gosh, I know. I'm like, I was setting up in here and I was like, it's a little echoey, but yeah, this isn't my original setup. I just tried to make it kind of look similar to it.
It looks great. It looks very industrial. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, I was like, I like these panels. I think they're in right now. Let me, because these are supposed to go up to my
I
office.
think they're in right now.
Yeah. Let me
Check.
get in. Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah.
That's funny. Okay, so no paneling, no diffusion. So not on set, but do you do any post editing to mitigate? Okay, I probably filmed this in a garage. It's gonna sound
Mhm.
echoey. It's gonna sound like I'm in a church. Like, how would you go about like knowing that you can count on your post editing?
Yeah, I mean, especially with social media specifically, I'll kind of just leave it because if I am in that environment, I'm like, okay, it's gonna sound echoey. So I'm just gonna leave it how it is.
It's a little bit more forgiving.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But with short films or like documentaries, of course, we're kind of going in there and
Right.
we're cleaning it up and not making it sound so like reverb and echoey and kind of just
Mhm.
toning that down. But yeah, like yeah, I use a lot of the tools in Premiere to do that.
Oh, wow. That's cool. I love
Mhm.
that because it's such a train of thought that I think even the chat is having is like, do I do this during production or is there like room afterwards?
Mhm.
There's a level of desperation of like, what are the right tools
Yeah.
like that I can get my hands on and also the ones that are just software tools. Um,
Yeah. I know a lot of people on set are usually like, let's fix it in post. And I'm like, but how much can we fix in post? Like,
right. There's a
forget.
level of like you need to know if you can keep that promise of fixing it in post.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
so that experimentation, I think that you were talking about earlier, testing different types of audios and different spaces is something I'm currently experimenting with. I have a garage as well, by the way.
Nice.
Crazy. The me putting audio equipment in a garage, it sounds terrible.
That's
But
it.
I was like, you know what? Let's try it and
Yeah.
let's see what these presets are about. And some presets there are meant for audio, and I did not know they could be like Easter eggs all over Premiere
Yeah.
of have you noticed that? They're just like, okay, hold on, what about this?
Yeah. There's so much
Yeah.
in Premiere that I have yet to even discover, to be honest. And I'm learning every single day. I was like experimenting and just stumbling upon something. And I'm like, wait, since when?
Yeah.
But that's the fun part about it is like, yeah, oh, found it.
Yeah, and it could very well be that there is that tool just got introduced.
Hmm.
And that could be why you haven't found it before. That's often the case. Things are often changing here.
Yeah,
But definitely like it's a discovery process in itself, I think.
it is. And I'm excited for what's to come too.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Actually, you segued right into my next question. Um, yeah, like I have aspirations for Adobe Premiere. I love spending time in Adobe Premiere. There's a lot of time spent as an editor, and I
Mhm.
imagine you do as well, spending long hours editing.
Yeah.
So, are there any aspirations you have in the future, whether that's to like improve your speed, whether that's to just improve the way you assemble your work or preview your work or things that currently you think maybe could be improved? What do you
Mhm.
think?
I honestly think because I love color grading, so
Mm.
I think the Lumetri, it does what it can right now, but also I feel like I'm hoping that could become improved because a lot of people, they're switching out, but I'm faithful. So I'm like, no, I have hope. And I really hope that the
It's like
layout stays.
a sport team
Yeah.
almost.
No, I'm
But
faithful. I'm here all day, Adobe. Yeah. So
yeah.
that's kind of my hopes is
Yeah.
like, okay, Lumetri panel is kind of gonna step it up because I
Okay.
do color for the most part in here, right? Like I'm
We'll love to see like some beautiful last minute tip that you can show us about color.
yeah,
Um,
it's pretty cool. I usually use like which part is it?
Curves,
Like yeah, the curves and the
HSL.
colors a lot. Yeah. So I'm kind of more using instead of basic, I'm more using the curves here to add like shadows or
Yeah.
midtones because you have your shadows, your midtones, and your highlights. And then even saturating certain colors, right? Not specifically this one, but for my other videos, people are like, how's your blue so vibrant? And like, how do you
Hmm.
do that? So I'm just the hue versus saturation and just kind of marking like let's say this yellow, going in there and kind of just eyeballing it here. But like it'll, depending on the lighting in your frame as well,
Yeah.
it'll help saturate it. So Lumetri has really good, like it's good enough for me to color right now,
Okay.
but I'm really hoping that it does, I could
Or it could be
push.
more fun.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, because I love color grading and
I do think the levels are a lot of fun once you start navigating them. The way
yeah.
that you'd have to toggle or change the curves is pretty hands-on. I would
Hmm.
agree the same thing. I think I've definitely seen a lot of progressions on Premiere, sort of imitating the Lumetri color based on the UI of Lightroom.
Hmm.
So that was cool because I was like, okay, I can get along with this now.
Yeah.
Um, but still it's not as clear. There's a lot of other tools in there though that are very hyper complex, like scopes, which may kind of be just very specific
Yeah.
to professionals, um, not a shot and gun kind of thing, like just go. Um, so yeah, I can totally relate to that. So let's
Yeah.
hope
So
we will put in those in the wishing well
I know, crossing my
and
fingers.
and hope for the best. But yeah, stay tuned, folks. And I absolutely love your journey, Desiree. I think
Mhm.
this is so exciting to meet other creators that have a very similar love for this amazing profession that I think is constantly changing. So I would love to share with the folks here where they can keep up with you.
Mhm.
So can you share with us some spaces that we can get in touch with your latest work or get in
Yeah.
touch with you?
Of course. So on Instagram, it is Lacapture Visuals. And then my YouTube channel is also Lacapture Visuals. That's where I post a lot more long form, in-depth tutorials and just educational or like vlog style cinematic stuff. And then TikTok is Lacapture as well. And then my website, lacaptureproductions.com.
Is your website, you can show us, by the
Oh
way.
yeah,
I don't know.
for sure.
Is your website a space we can also see your projects and see more of your work?
Yeah, actually it is. Okay, but to be honest, I haven't been so
That's us. That's everyone. Don't worry.
updating it.
That's
Yes.
all of us. But nevertheless, your projects are worth seeing. So hopefully.
Yeah.
So folks, this has been super fun, Desiree. I wish you the best in your ongoing journey, and we hope to continue to witness it. Everybody on the chat, thank you for participating, and stay tuned for the next live stream. My name is Sin Lagos, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.